Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Optimal Wealth Podcast, where we discuss creating passive income through real estate. Our mission is to help educate investors on how to grow wealth and invest passively. My name is Jarod Alexander, and I am a passive investor, currently in 6 syndications as a limited partner. I am also the founder of Optimal Equity Group, which is a real estate investment firm that was created primarily to help educate the passive investor. We do that in a couple of different ways. One is we provide education to help give you the confidence to get into the passive investing space. And two, each episode we will interview amazing guests that explore the strategies, insights, and secrets used by successful investors. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out on your real estate journey, this podcast is designed to help give you the confidence and knowledge you need to make informed and profitable decisions. Welcome to another episode of the Optimal Wealth Podcast. Today, I am super excited to have our guest on the show, Kristyn Carmichael. Kristyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you. And well, I guess let me just go ahead and read the introduction, and then we're going to go a little bit further here. But, Kristyn is a, divorce attorney, family mediator, and certified CDFA, which stands for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, so mouthful there, has dedicated her career to helping families navigate the complexities of divorce and other transitions with compassion and expertise. So Kristyn also serves as the training director for the Lodestar Dispute Resolution Center at ASU Law, where she educates the public on conflict resolution, communication, and negotiation skills. So outside of her primary practice, Kristyn is also involved in the real estate world, owning a few short-term rentals, showcasing the versatility and the entrepreneurial spirit there, Kristyn. So yeah. So with that said, if you could, go a little bit more into your background, tell us, how you got into family law and the mediation space, and then also, maybe touch on a little bit of the real estate, the short-term rentals, and we're gonna dive a little deeper into this as we go on here today. So
thank you again for having me. So I'm a licensed attorney and, as mentioned, certified divorce financial analyst, which is just a really big mouthful. I help people understand their finances, primarily when they're getting divorced and getting married. So we work with a lot of couples as they're moving in together, so just cohabitating, but they aren't getting married, couples that are getting married, couples that are going through divorces or breakups. And really what we help them understand is the financial and legal complexities around doing so, because having investment properties or other real estate when you are in a couple is very different than when you're an individual, or when you're an individual and then you're getting married, how you're blending all of those pieces together. So really passionate about family law because I just love helping people. And I understand that when clients are coming to me, it's probably one of the most challenging times in their lives, or the most exciting time in their life if they're getting married. So ultimately, we're just there to kind of navigate the emotions and help people find collaborative solutions that work for both of them. And outside of that, I do own some short-term and long-term rental properties that I actually manage. So kind of have experience on both ends. My clients that have real estate find that very beneficial because we know all the ins and outs and the complexities of being a landlord. So that really gives them some insight when we're working through their agreements as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, I just think, it's so important, when you are getting married and, kind of meshing everything you have together with another person, to understand, what that looks like financially. It's something my wife and I had to go through, and it starts at the bank accounts. Like, are we gonna, do joint bank accounts? Are we just gonna put it all in one, or, and then you throw the investment properties in there. And then now we didn't have anything. My wife, had a lot of trust in me, when we first started out. So, thankful for her. But, it's definitely important to look at. And that's, what Kristyn highlights, which I love the fact that, you just don't practice family law. I mean, I'm sure you're great at that area, but you're I love the education part where you can definitely help people understand what that looks like, starting out. And so if you could, let's go a little bit deeper into that, because I want to highlight your experience or expertise really in this area. What are some things people need to look at when they are, looking at getting married, maybe have some investment properties in their portfolio? What does that process usually look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, first thing is a lot of people don't talk about their finances when they get married, which is kind of silly because it's one of the main reasons that people get a divorce. So you should probably talk about your finances. Just number one, just what is there? The surprising number of couples that I've met who have never talked about how much debt they have, what they own, how much retirement they have saved. I think that money is kind of like a taboo topic for some people, so they don't feel as comfortable talking about it. But this is going to be your life partner, so they should know what's going on in terms of finances. So just knowing what there is. But kind of two pieces. So let's say you already own an investment property. This is really important to pay attention to because this is something that you've owned prior to marriage. And you have to make the decision if you want to share that with your spouse moving forward or not. And so what a lot of people assume is, well, I had that prior to marriage, so that's just mine, regardless of what happens in our relationship. Where in reality, what happens is you take that separate asset, something you've owned prior to marriage, and you can what's called commingle or transmutate. It's my favorite legal word because it sounds like zombies.
Right.
Your property from separate into community. So it can become marital property without you intending it to. So it's really important to decide if you want that to be something that if something happened with you and your spouse in the future, you would want to share or not share. And that's where we help couples with prenuptial agreements or prenups or premarital agreement. It's all the same terminology for essentially a contract before you get married if something were to happen in the future. Now, I just want to preface, a lot of people don't like prenups because they feel really negative, like you don't trust me. You have to think of it in a different way. I like to describe it to my clients as insurance. You buy home insurance, but you don't plan on lighting your house on fire. You buy car insurance, but you don't plan on crashing it into a pole. You don't plan on your relationship ending, but the reality of the statistics is first-time marriages are around 45 to 50% chance of ending. Second time you're getting married, around 60%. Third time you're getting married, around 75%. So those are really big numbers. We want our couples to be together forever. That is the goal. But you just want to be cautious of if you have something prior to marriage, do you want that to be shared or not? So, and the nice thing is working in a collaborative way with your spouse, it could be a blend of things. So I've had couples say, well, any rent that we make off of that, we're going to share. And if we sell it and we put it into a joint home, we're going to share it. But if we still own it when we get separated, then that's going to be my separate thing. So it doesn't have to be all separate or all together. It can be a mix of both. But it's just really important to remember that those things could commingle and become marital. So that is something that you may be sharing with your spouse in the future. And then if you're planning on investing in properties while you're married, just being considerate of how you are titling and mortgaging those items. So, for example, if you're going to title something while you're married, making sure that you're both on the title, that you're both on the mortgage, that you're both participating in that. In Arizona, for example, we have what's called a disclaimer deed. And unfortunately, certain spouses will sign these, and that may eliminate all of their interest in the property or some of the interest in the property if something were to happen in the future. So really, we just want to be cautious of what do you want to stay separate? What do you want to be joint? And then titling and allocating those things properly as you move through those agreements. Obviously, also being on the same page of what's your budget, buying something that's going to work for both of you. How are you going to manage the property? Having all those conversations so that you're both on the same page about what that responsibility looks like if you're going to be the landlord or if you're going to hire a property manager.
Yeah. And thanks for walking us through that. It makes sense about an insurance policy, right? I mean, you don't plan on this stuff happening, but God forbid if it does, I mean, at least you have an outline of, okay, who's getting what or what's, so a question for you. So whenever, say if it's even just a primary house, right? And somebody owns that and you're moving into it, like what is, like, does a certain, whenever it comes community property and you get on the deed, does the person that owned the property before you got on the deed, do they still get the equity before that, or is it just once you're on that deed, the house is joint, and whenever you sell it, you kind of split?
It's a good question. So it's going to completely depend on what state people live in, for example, but it's kind of one of those things where like the more things that you do to make it look like it's joint, the more likely it's going to all be joint. Right. So it's kind of that, like, if it tastes like and it smells like and it looks like it is that thing. So like if you add someone to your mortgage and you add them to your title and they're helping you pay the mortgage and they're living there, the more things that you add jointly in most states, the more likely all of it's going to can be considered joint. We have laws in Arizona that allow us to kind of parse out what is called the community lien on the house. So that's like, you have a portion from prior to marriage, but there's a community portion of the house. And so we run a calculation based on the growth of the home prior to marriage and the growth of the home during the marriage. So there's ways to parse it out. But at the end of the day, kind of the cleanest way to do it is to just have a prenup, because then you can spell out all of those options. So you can spell out, for example, if we were to sell this house and put it into another house, is a portion of it mine because I owned beforehand? Or is all of it mine forever? Or are we doing something where it's mine, but you have to pay me a little bit as though it's rent? So there's infinite number of ways that we can navigate it. But the problem is most people don't realize that until they're going through a separation. So we want to get that up front to be able to have this conversation so people are on the same page, particularly because a lot of these things, home or investment properties, are one of your biggest assets, and they're one of your biggest investments that you've made in your relationship or prior to relationship. So we want to navigate that. And you're a lot more protected if you're getting married than if you're moving in together. So let's say you're just cohabitating. So Gen Z, for example, much more likely to cohabitate and never get married, at least currently with statistics. Right. So what happens is, let's say that someone owns a home and then their significant other moves in with them. That significant other could be contributing towards the home in terms of taking care of it, in terms of adding value, paying the mortgage, paying those pieces, or in terms of an investment property, managing that investment property, updating it, and doing all of those things. But if they were to separate, if that person had never been added to the title of the mortgage, they're not protected under marital law. So they don't get anything out of that property. So that's where we do like cohabitation agreements, having a contract in place about what that looks like, because we get a lot of couples going through what we call breakup agreements. They're not divorcing, they were never married, but they bought property together while they were together. Well, now there's not like a clear law dictating how that's split up if there's a dispute, like there is with divorce law. So we have to look at it from a different perspective, which is civil law, looking at it in terms of like a lawsuit over property or an asset. So it's just kind of putting your ducks in a row and getting those contracts in place as you go, because each individual circumstance is going to be different. So we just want to cover it from the get-go so that we don't have to worry about it being an issue on the back end.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me, it's like an operating agreement, even amongst friends or family members, right? I mean, you want to just spell it all out, right? That way, God forbid, if something does happen, hey, we have an arrangement that, so and so is going to get X amount or whatever, right? You can buy out or whatever that looks like.
Yeah,
I tell you, and I guess it shouldn't shock me as much as it does, but I mean, almost 50% of the people that get married end with divorce. I mean, that's a pretty high number, right?
A flip of a coin.
I know, like,
Which sounds insensitive but it's accurate.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it's a statistic for a reason. So, well, with that, before we touch on the real estate, and because I definitely want to dive into your experience, with the short-term and long-term rentals. But so you kind of started off with the front end with the prenup, how to get everybody on the same page, and and it's like you said, it's muddy. I mean, it's pretty
mhm.
hard to go to your partner, significant other, wife, husband, whatever, and say, hey, we need to put this on paper. God forbid if this doesn't work out, because you got
Yeah.
emotions, and I don't know, I'm sure people take that personal a lot, like, oh, are you
Yes.
not committed to this? And that till death do us part type of deal, right,
Yep.
comes to mind. It's like, but yeah, 50% is 50%. So I understand, that. And now, all right, now let's say, the God forbid you get, that 50% that does get divorced.
Mhm.
What does that process look like? What do people need to look for, pay attention to?
Yeah.
Yeah, just walk us through that. If, all right, hey, we come to it, we're not able to stay together, we're gonna go our separate ways. As far as the assets go, how does that look?
Yeah. So, in either direction, if you're getting married and you're looking at a prenup or you're getting a divorce, a lot of people kind of their go-to is I have to hire attorneys. Like it's a legal process. And it is a legal process. And attorneys can be very, very helpful. I am one.
Yeah.
But what our process looks like is we do mediation. So mediation is unique in that what we do is we sit with couples outside of court and I help them work through all of their agreements, division of assets and debts, parenting plans if they have children, or with a prenup, sit down and work through those difficult conversations together so they can reach their agreements outside of court and without having to pay substantial legal fees. So when it comes to the prenup in like the beginning of the relationship, yes, it's super awkward to go to your significant other and say, I want a prenup, because prenups classically in the media, in movies are, I get everything, you get nothing. And so that's just an extreme. Prenups can be a very collaborative process. So what we do is we sit down with a couple and we help them work through the biggest issues that lead to divorce, which are expectations, communication, and finances. So we work through those things and find solutions that will work for both of them, where it's not leaving one of them with nothing if the relationship ends. It's very thoughtful about different circumstances happening and how does that impact their relationship. If they were to get to the end of their relationship and separate, same thing through the divorce process is we are sitting with them and helping them reach agreements that are very family friendly. So a lot of my couples, especially if they have minor children, come to me and say, well, divorce is bad for your kids. It's actually proven by psychologists to be how you go through that process and your relationship with one another, not the divorce itself. So we help people really focus on their children, family-friendly agreements that are going to help them co-parent, and look at assets and debts from the perspective of actual finances. So a lot of attorneys, no fault to their own. We used to joke about it while we were in law school. We went to law school because we don't like math. And I will never forget, I had a professor who was like, do not say that because you will do math every single day. And I do. And that's why I went back to get my certification to really focus on finances during a divorce, because there's a separate tax code, part of the IRS for the year you get a divorce. There's different ways to divide real estate and retirement accounts and a lot of assets that don't apply except when you're getting a divorce. So it's very unique. So what we like to get into, we talk about, the average attorney, they don't have a lot of time in court with the judge. So they're really just covering on some basic issues. Is one of you keeping the house or are you selling it? What is the buyout? What's the buyout amount for the house if one of you is keeping it? And what's that timeline look like? So pretty short list. We're looking at it from the perspective of, okay, if you're going to buy it out, we need to consider, what about potential closing costs? How are you removing the other person from the mortgage? How are you handling title? How are we handling capital gains? Especially when we get into investment properties, What about the depreciation taxes and the capital gains taxes that are impacting you? Because most of the time when we look at property and family law, we say, oh, it's worth 300,000. We have 100,000 in a loan. So the equity is 200,000. But that's not the equity in investment property, because we're not considering depreciation tax and the capital gains that we get hit on investment properties that are different than the tax benefits we have on primary residences. So it's a very different world and perspective when we're looking at dividing investment properties. So we're really getting into all of the nitty-gritty. We handle the drafting and filing of all their legal documents, and ultimately mediation is about an 80 to 90% savings over working with individual attorneys. And so particularly if we're focusing on real estate, investment properties are your unique thing where you could arguably keep it together with your spouse. Like you could retain that as a business moving forward. If you do, as you mentioned, you need an operating agreement. So most people that are married and have investment properties, they don't have an operating agreement because, as you said, they're family, they're your spouse. But moving forward, there would be your business partner. So you would need to have the operating agreement in place to be able to handle all of those issues of who's going to manage it, when are you dispersing funds, how do you agree on what repairs or upgrades need to be made, all of the logistics that you just handled on a day-to-day basis with your spouse when you were together. Or you can sell the investment properties. If you do so, we just want to be conscious, again, of those tax implications like depreciation tax and capital gains taxes. And if you're doing a buyout, one of you could retain the property and buy out the other person's interest. If we do that, that gets more complicated. We're looking at how do we remove one of you from the mortgage, because likely you're both on the mortgage and most people think that they have to refinance. Little tip, a lot of times you can assume a mortgage even if it's not assumable, if it's required to do so in a divorce decree. So we actually navigate that with our clients, help them figure out if that's possible before the divorce is even finalized. And then also, what is the buyout going to be? Again, that traditional buyout valuation is just what's the value minus the mortgage, where in reality, we know an investment property is much more likely worth what is the value minus the mortgage minus all of those tax implications, because most of us have been depreciating the property for years, which is going to impact the value unless you do a 1031 exchange. So really, we want to be conscious of all those details that play out in that, because the numbers are going to be drastically different. I have a client right now who they have 6 investment properties. One spouse made a proposal not considering any taxes. We ran all the numbers considering taxes, and it is a drastically different buyout amount because they've been depreciating the properties for 10 years. So that's a massive amount of depreciation that we need to account for because we're not handling it in a 1031 exchange. So it's just all those little details. We're essentially helping our clients work through all of those pieces because a lot of times in the court system, attorneys are busy, judges are busy. You get about 20 minutes in front of the judge. They're not worried about all those details. They're just worried about getting in the next case. So we want to just be as thoughtful as possible with that. And we also work individually with people to work through those details. So even if you're not mediating your divorce, but you're in the middle of it, we help people look at their proposals, navigate if they actually make sense, look at those tax implications. Those are just pieces that are really unique that don't impact people that don't have investment properties.
Yeah. And yeah, again, thanks for going through that and walking us through that process. And I want to just highlight the value I think, that you bring to these couples going through, I mean, some of the worst times in their lives of, having to, separate and, I mean, that's tough in itself. And then you got to worry about all the assets. And so not only, mediating and walking through that process. And I like how you talked about, the family and figuring out what the kids, I mean, because that's a huge part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also, want to highlight the financial aspect of it that you bring. I mean, because that's super important. Just like for the example with the taxes, of course, being in real estate, I know how much, just taxes makes a huge, a huge, implication on a deal or, an investment and, capital. Anyways, yeah, I mean, so that's that's a big, something that a big value you bring. But I want you to highlight, Kristyn, and because we got to chat a little bit before this, and I want you to highlight what you do when people go through that divorce process, because you were telling me a lot of the especially with the finances, the men usually handle a lot of that, right? So the women are kind of left, you know, out in the rain, so to speak, and really don't have a clue of kind of how to budget. I think you were giving me one example of just paying a bill and going through that process. So if you could just real quick touch on what you offer to clients as well, as far as just walking, and it could be man or woman, but I think primarily you said you work with women on just kind of helping educate them financially on how to take the next steps.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
So I think it's just, I like to say, because when I'm not with my clients, as you mentioned, I teach everything that's conflict related at ASU's law school. So, de-escalating conflict, communication in conflict, all of those pieces. I like to joke that I'm always just surrounded by conflict. So, I think that unfortunately, communicating in conflict and money are the things that we're just not taught, like in school. I find it fascinating that we get our first jobs and we're just expected to know how to do taxes. I don't know about you, but my high school wasn't teaching taxes 101. And that's just silly to me, because it's those are basic things we have to do every day. You have to pay your taxes, you have to pay your credit card, you have to know what interest is, getting your first mortgage or knowing how to invest in your first property is extremely challenging because nobody taught you how to do it. Yeah. So really, we find that these big moments in people's lives, getting married, getting a divorce, is really when that financial education really shows through, the lack of the financial education. So most of the time in couples, what we do is we disperse the workload because it makes sense. There's two of you to handle those things. So primarily in couples where there's children, one person typically takes on the role of being the caretaker. The other person tends to be the person that manages the finances and the household in that way. That's great when there's two of you, but if you go through a separation, now you both have to handle each of those things. And so our process is really educational. We're really there to educate people, whether they're getting married or divorced, on what do you have? So we refer to that legally as financial disclosure, disclosing all your assets. You have to do it to get a prenup. You have to do it to get a divorce. You have to know what there is, because you can't make a knowledgeable decision without knowing what your finances are. And then walking through and making sure both people are on the same page. Primarily the wife is considered what's called the out spouse. So the spouse that didn't handle the finances. But I have clients where husband was the out spouse and didn't handle the finances. So really, it's about walking them through and helping them be on the same page, because one person could probably easily look at finances and be like, oh, this makes sense. This is how we're dividing it. But the other person is feeling in a very vulnerable state because they haven't worked with the finances and they don't know how to do those things. That could be to the extreme, as I gave you an example of a client previously when we talked of, has never paid a bill, has never had a credit card, has never had a bank account. And a lot of these people don't have credit because everything has always been put in the other spouse's name, and then they were added as an authorized user. Well, that's okay until they remove all your authorized user, and then you lose all of your credit. So they might not even have a good credit score, even though they've been very responsible with money, because nothing was ever in their name, so they never could build credit. So it's really about educating people on what they have, what they need to be concerned about. And then on the base scale, it could be, how do you open a bank account? How do you pay your credit card? How do you build credit? All the way up to the complexities of, how do you divide restricted stock units or complicated retirement accounts or employee stock purchase plans or handle real estate. So it really can vary based on the person's financial knowledge. But that's where we either act in two capacities. I will sit with the couple and help them work through the process from beginning to end as a neutral. So I am helping them both understand the information. there's always a balance of power there. One person could finish it in an hour, the other person it's going to take 4. So we have to balance that and make sure that they both understand the same information, but I'm working with both of them.
Yeah.
On the other side, just working as a CDFA, I work with individuals to understand their finances. So I had a client just today, and they're working with attorneys for their divorce, and I'm working with just one of them. And so they were the one that didn't handle their finances. So it's really just walking through, what is there? What does this proposal look like? What are the red flags that I'm seeing in the proposal? We're not thinking about taxes. We're not thinking about certain expenses when it comes to real estate, all of those pieces. And just helping them feel more confident about their finances. That's really what it is at the end of the day. A lot of these people will need the assistance of a financial planner or advisor long-term, because typically we do see a much drastic high rate of women going into poverty after divorce over men. That's because women tend to be the out spouse and they don't tend to be financially educated during their divorce. So they end up spending the money much faster than they should have, and then they're left with nothing. So it's really about educating people. I typically say, the average family law process is kind of like, we divide everything and then we push the baby bird out of the nest and we just hope they fly. Where our process is what we refer to as a divorce concierge service. So we are helping them with the process, but then also understand all the ancillary items their divorce is going to touch, from real estate to beneficiaries, trusts and estates, their taxes, financial planning long-term. We like to say to our clients, I'm not trying to scare you, but the financial decisions you make now are going to impact your finances for the rest of your life. So you need to be thoughtful about it. So we're really connecting them with a wide web of people to really help them be as successful as possible after their divorce process is finalized and have the help that they need to make the best decisions they can.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that education process you offer. And it's just like just having those bumpers, right? And just like you said, not just, letting them fly, just, all right, we're going to guide you. And then you're going to have all the resources you need to be able to make an educated decision, about, because I would imagine a lot of people sometimes get pretty big payouts too. And they got this big chunk of money.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, and then just start go spending on whatever. And next thing you know, a year or two later, they're sitting there broke and wondering what happened. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I had another client today that's going to end up with a ton of cash. And I immediately connected them with a financial advisor. And I was like, they need to then advise you where you're putting this. Because if you want to do something fun, that's great. It's not saying that you can't use any of it, but you also need to look long term. Or, I'm always asking my clients, I get clients all the time, well, I want to take money out of my retirement to buy real estate. And I'm like, we're going to get hit with taxes and penalties in most cases. And 2, sure, that could be a great investment if you have enough already saved.
Yeah.
But most people don't have enough saved for retirement. So it's like, I'm all for diversifying. I'm all for real estate, but I'm not all for let's, pay it a bunch of taxes and penalties and gut all our accounts to put it into a house. Like, we got to find some semblance of balance is what we're looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's other ways to do that to avoid those penalties as
Correct.
well. I sit down with clients and, first thing we talk about is for one, is this the right fit for you? Is this going to make sense given your financial background and, what you have in retirement accounts? Or, I'm not going to sit there and take $50,000 from you if you need that to pay the bills and pay the mortgage, right? It just doesn't make sense. So definitely got to do that. But now I will share, there are some, to your point of diversification, like through self-directed IRA accounts, again, back to what Kristyn said, though, you got to have the money and you got to have your retirement already in place and then diversify out of that. It's alternative assets, right?
And that's where we're also always connecting our clients, if my clients are really interested in like diversifying those pieces, connecting them with individuals such as yourself, such as a mortgage broker that can really help them understand like what their options are. Because at the end of the day, because I've experienced investment properties, I can give them some general concept of it, but it's not my area of expertise long-term as an investment. So it's really guiding those clients to say, instead of just, we're just going to do this, making the educated decision and talking to the right people. Because just a simple example, I had clients come to me for a divorce. They come to a consultation. I've never had a conversation with them. They are so proud of themselves because they liquidated everything. And they're like, look, we liquidated it all. It's all ready to be divided. And it's like, they liquidated things like retirement accounts that they got hit with penalties and taxes that they didn't need to, because I could have divided them without those. And so it's just like some people, they get too far ahead of the game. And so it's like, that's where those advisors are for, to be able to have those conversations to confirm if you should be doing that. Because, you could use your retirement in some ways to get real estate without having to take the money out of the account. But if you jump the gun and you start taking the money out without asking the experts, you're going to pay unnecessary fees. Yeah. So to me, it's just like making sure that you get your questions answered before you make the move is the biggest thing.
Yeah. Well, and this is a reason, Chris, and I was, one of the reasons I was super excited to have you on too, is for one, to help educate, our listeners on what this process looks like. But two is, the importance of hiring a professional, right? I mean, whenever you say they liquidated their 401k and could have saved none, I mean, I'm thinking, hey, that's 10% at least that they just paid in penalties off what could have been $50,000 or it could have been $1 million, right? Yeah. Like that's a big, and to hire Kristyn for a fraction of that, it's just, that's hire a professional, let them work, and then again, like, especially with Kristyn, all her services, they will walk you through that process. It's just like hiring a good CPA. Yeah, you can sit down and do your taxes for, paying $50-$60 for, a software that can do it for you. I'm blanking on, what is it?
TurboTax.
TurboTax, thank you.
I love when my clients like, I TurboTaxed. I'm like, with as much property as you have? Like guaranteed you miss tax benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the amount that you pay the CPA is so much less than what they save you.
Yeah, it is. I had a buddy that he hired a professional CPA and he's walking away and he sold some investment properties. I mean, probably saved about $150,000 in taxes. Right.
Yeah, I just talked to our tax advisor today, and because I'm liquidating one of my investment properties, and I was like, what is a way that I can save money I don't want to do an exchange. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what's a way that I can save money? And they gave me all these great ideas with retirement, all these other pieces, because I'm a business owner. And I was like, I would have never known that. And she ran the initial amount and it was like $5,000 to $10,000. And I was like, oh, okay. That's good to know. Yeah. And all it was just like moving the money into different accounts so that they'd be more tax beneficial. It wasn't like some big expense that I had to take on to do that. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, definitely not going to argue with you on that one. We're just going to move the money around.
Not at all. Well, and again, just the importance of somebody that knows what they're doing and what to look for. I mean, the IRS has all these guidelines of what they will, what you can save in taxes, because you're providing housing, the government wants that, right? And so they give you a lot of benefit, but you don't know what to look for unless you know what to look for. So that's
right. And the tax code is so dense. I tell my clients all the time. So we give guidance around tax implications with the divorce, but we don't give tax advice.
Right.
So for example, with my clients that have the 5 investment properties and we're valuing those based on taxes, I'm sending all of the important pertinent questions to their CPA. CPA is giving me the estimates. Then we're running in conjunction with everything for a proposal for the divorce. So ultimately, it's really kind of a partnership to manage that. But just the tax code applicable for the year that you get a divorce is a few pages long, tiny 8-point file, multiple columns, Like I could never imagine being a CPA and having to know the entire breadth of the tax code. Like that's just mind blowing to me. And that's why you have a CPA. Like you should have someone that handles your taxes because they're going to know all of those little tips and tricks.
Yep, absolutely. And it's steadily changing and evolving. I mean, especially
Mhm.
since COVID. I mean, my CPA was like, oh my gosh, she's just trying to keep up, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's do this, Kristyn, because I think our listeners got a ton of value of whatever of what you just walked through, and again, big takeaways: hire a professional. Don't try to do this yourself, right? Hire
Yeah.
somebody with experience in the field that can walk you through this process, and preferably someone like Kristyn that offers all these additional services, so to speak, that they can help you walk through that the tax implications. I mean, some of the, you're saving a lot of money there. So
Yeah.
anyways, hire a professional, educate yourself, and and have a good CPA as well. Yeah.
Yes.
That yeah, and I'm sure Kristyn knows one if you need any suggestions there, so reach out to her. But let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and segue into our fire round, is what I like to call it, Kristyn.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ask you 4 questions. We're gonna talk about mindset, books you'd recommend, and that's a kind of a segue into our first question here. So if you could recommend a book for real estate investors or people just starting out, just looking to get involved in this space, and then another one for mindset, right? So what's one book for real estate and another one for mindset that you would recommend?
Yeah. So I will say, kind of segueing into that, if for some reason divorce and real estate is fascinating to you as a subset, we do have myself and Asher Cohen, who's a realtor in Arizona. We do have a podcast called Divorce and Real Estate where we just spend hours talking about divorce and real estate. So if you're like really interested in the nitty gritty of how it happens and you could watch that for hours, just go look for it. It's on our website and it's also on YouTube. But just for those that like want more information. When it comes to books, so not real estate specific, but business specific, which I think is really helpful because I really like to highlight to people that are investing, like a real estate investment is a business. So I think a lot of people just look at it as an investment, but it really depends. So, for example, if you're investing with Jarod, that's something that they're managing that investment. But if you're investing in like a short-term or long-term rental property, that's something where that's a business that you're now running. And it should run as a business because in the business world, we talk about how frequently businesses go out of business. That's the same thing with investment properties, like buying a property that's not successful or that you're losing money on. So you want to be thoughtful about it, just like it is a business. So something I'm actually reading right now, it's called 10X is Easier Than 2X. It's by Dan Sullivan. It's really about maximizing the things that are your, bread and butter, your expertise. So I think a lot of times we're constantly trying to reinvent and come up with all these little subsets of things to do. And it really focuses on like, what are you really great at? And how can you put that into your business? So as an example, if you're really great at hospitality, like you love helping people know what restaurant to go to and advise them on where their best hike is going to be. And you love those little touches of like, having all the perfect things in your place. Maybe a short-term rental is better for you than a long-term rental because that allows you to have more of that hospitality and then you can grow your ratings there and get more people into that. Where a long-term rental, you're not going to have the same experience. So it's really about maximizing what you're great at to make 10 times what you're making. And then mindset-wise, anything that Brianna Wiest, I think that's how you pronounce it. Wiest, I guess it could be Weist too, based on if it's German. But anything that she's read, written, but one of hers is 100 essays that'll change the way you think. It's really nice for people that don't love to read because they're really short. So it's like, I think the longest essay in there is like 8 pages. So it's perfect because you just read it, you get something really great out of it, you can put the book down, and then you pick it up when you're ready for something else to help with your mindset.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great there. And it's funny you mentioned that 2x is better than or 10x is better than 2x, because I just started listening to The Gap and the Gain again.
Same author, I think.
Yeah, Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. Yeah, they co-authored that. And yeah, highly recommend y'all checking that book out, because it's made a huge impact in my life. And they got some series too. So they got the Who Not How, Gap and the Gain, and then they just came out with 10x is better than 2x. So
another one that's not as popular, I think, in the real estate world, but is in the business world, is Profit First. And if like you're somebody that is not, I don't want to say not great with money, but like not feeling super confident about your money and starting a business, it's super helpful because it just gives you like a really easy breakdown of this is how much you should be making, and this is how much your expenses should be, and this is how much you should save for taxes. Like, to me, it's like the how to what I wish we had in high school to be able to manage our finances in business kind of book.
They should definitely change the education structure of like, I don't even get started on that. Yeah. But I want to highlight
a whole other podcast episode.
That we could spend an hour just talking about that. Probably, and that's just scratching the surface. But I want to highlight, I like how you talked about, run it like a business, because it is a business. Treat it like a business, because first getting started out into this space, especially when you're looking at single family homes, long term, short term, it's easy to get caught up in, this is a great house, great area, something that hey, I would want to live here, right? We're going to do this, we're going to make it, do this to the floors, cabinet, right? And you got to make it look nice, but you got to take the emotion out of it as best you can. There's still emotion involved, right? But reduce that as much as you can. Put it on a spreadsheet. Make sure the numbers work. And then back to Kristyn's point, just treat it like a business, right? And then, determine your goals. And I want to, just mention, if you are looking at the short-term rental space and do self-manage like Kristyn does, check out a podcast we did with Yona Weiss. I can't remember what episode it was, but he talks about some tax benefits that you can get from the short-term rentals as well. So, and pretty, to the point that you can take some of those losses against your active income, which is, again, huge as far as saving taxes there. But, and determine what your goals are, right? And how much time you have. So it's really important to just sit down, understand all this, and read a book like Kristyn just said, Profit First, and understand the basics of what you're doing, how the business works, that idea of pay yourself first, right? Making sure you're getting what you need there, and then just being efficient in what you're doing, and then you can build on that. And it's almost, there's a book called Rocket Fuel that I read not too long ago, but it's kind of that, what you hear is start with the end in mind, right? Kind of figure out what you want to do, and then you can have a plan to execute that. So anyway, I love how you talked about that, Kristyn. A lot of people just give the book state and then we move on. So I like how we went a little deeper into that. So, and then kind of a segue. So with that, talking about goals, can you share a specific goal or dream that holds significance to you?
Yeah, to me, I love to travel. So it's kind of seeing as much of the world as I possibly can. And that really links to the business aspect of things, because it's like, if you can start bringing in those passive forms of income, the goal is that you don't have to be here doing it all the time. And so, to be able to run my firm, for example, like from London during the summer, would have no complaints, there. But yeah, so just seeing as much of the world, being able to see as much as I can instead of just being stuck at a desk. And I will say, your comment about like picking a house that's like what you want, that was the hardest thing on my first investment property. Was like, I wouldn't live here. And it's like, You don't have to live here. Someone else has to live here.
Yeah.
So it's taking the shopping for your house is very different than shopping for an investment property. I tell clients all the time, hiring a realtor when you're getting a divorce is very different than hiring a realtor any other time.
Yeah.
Looking at people that are helping with your mortgage during a divorce, very different than a mortgage broker any other time. You have to pick people and the circumstances based on the situation that you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I again want to comment too, just about, we talk a lot on this podcast about financial freedom, right? Because that's the goal of, a lot of what we're looking to obtain, right? Is just to having this passive income replace either our W-2 if somebody's looking to get out of something, out of their work and just be able to travel and go to London or whatever. But I think, a lot of us, or I'll speak for myself, I'm the type that can't even sit home and watch Netflix, for an hour or two, right? It's just hard for me. My wife is like, just chill, sit down. I think we were talking about this earlier, just relax. And I always got to be doing something, but more so what I'm trying to, create for myself and my family is the time freedom, right? And because I want to be able to be remote, work from London or wherever, work from the beach and just have that freedom to enjoy and experience life, right? I mean, unfortunately, and you I'm sure have a lot of stories, but life is short. Things happen. You just never know what the future holds. So enjoy it while you can. And so, anyways, that's what we're educating people here about is just put take the right steps, take the right actions. There's a lot of resources out there, and just what it comes down to is just you got to do it. You got to get started, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it's that first single family, we talk about multifamily, first investment, passive investment, whatever that looks like, is you just got to get started. And so our third question, so with all this, I mean, an entrepreneur, right? You got your business, you're teaching classes at ASU. How do you structure your day to maintain a healthy work-life balance? And do you have a morning routine that you can share with us?
I mean, I don't know if people would think I have a healthy work-life balance, but I really love my work. So that's kind of the work-life balance.
Yeah.
I think there's people that are just blessed with finding something that they absolutely love. And that's what they do for work. And then there's people that just go to work. And I'm just one of those people that's very blessed with, I love what I do. I love my clients. I love being able to be with my students. To me, like that balance is just being as active as possible. So, I can totally just get into work and sit at my desk all day. And I look up and I'm like, oh, it's dark outside. I probably should have, had dinner or done something other than just work. So just being active, I think that's the greatest part of living in Arizona. You can hike, you can go for a walk, you can get outside, go to the gym. And also to me, it's just, talking about not being able to just sit and watch Netflix. I really try every day to take 15 minutes at a minimum to read anything that you want to read. I personally am a big fiction person. I like fiction more than nonfiction, and just kind of like lets you get to a new world. And two, like taking another 15 minutes to learn something new. Like let that be you're trying to learn a new language, or you're trying to learn to do a hobby, or you're trying to learn something. I heard this thing the other day of like learning something new makes you feel stupid, so you don't like to do it. But in reality, it's actually making you smarter. It's like when you go to the gym and you lift weights, you feel weak, but it's making you stronger. So it's taking that mindset, that Jarod said of you only get to live once. Like you get to do it once. So why not do it the best that you possibly can? So to me, it's just like it's being active, and it's reading something, learning something, doing something new every day, so that I'm constantly, learning and growing and seeing what path I want to take and what things I want to do.
Yeah. No, I love it. And there's a book called Atomic Habits. And
It's great.
Yeah. And one thing it talks about in there is just getting 1% better every day, right? Just 1%. And the
author, which I'm drawing a blank on, by the way, is just like a genius human being in general. And anything that he comes out with, I'm like in awe and put it into my life.
Yeah. Yeah. James Clear. Yeah. Yeah, great book. If you haven't read it, definitely check that one out. All right, and then last and final question, the one you've been probably thinking about for the past hour here. If you can be remembered for one thing, what would that be?
I thought this is the hardest one. Because I'm one of those people where, like, again, you get the time that you're here and you make the most of it, and then somebody else gets their time. But to me, I just genuinely love helping people navigate through difficult times. And so, I guess it's that mediator in me, or the conflict person that handles all the conflict. But just like being a good friend, a good partner, a good professional that can help people go through their process. I want to make things as smooth as possible for people. So if it's something that I can help with, I, would love to be remembered for being able to make a positive impact on people's lives. I think, unfortunately, there's just, as I teach with conflict, I'm like, we think of conflict as a fight, but we also, conflict is conflict with our own head of, like, what do we want for dinner? Conflict with traffic, conflict with customer service that we have to deal with. It's just, there's a lot of negativity in the world generally. And so to me, it's just kind of finding the silver lining as much as you can. It's like when I'm driving on the 51 here in Phoenix and people are like laying on their horn and they're in traffic. I'm like, you are surrounded by a beautiful mountain range. Like, if you just look up an inch, just an inch, like, it'll make your whole day better. So I think it's just being remembered as trying to find the positive and be as beneficial to people as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's great. And you're a glass half full type of gal there, Kristyn. Well, and that goes to the gap in the game, right? And that's what they
Yeah.
talk about in there is, and especially, it's tailored toward entrepreneurs, right? And it's so easy that we're just focused on that moving target, right? I was just listening to a podcast earlier talking about that, and and it's all right. I get here, I achieve this goal, and it's like, now what, right?
Yeah.
And I'm focused on, oh, now I don't have this. Now I got to go obtain that, instead of, oh no, hey, I just accomplished all this, and now I can focus on the next goal, right? Because it's good to have goals and, things to strive for, right? I'm a big goal setter and things like that. But, let's focus on the win. And it could be the small wins of, like, all right,
Yeah.
hey, I am stuck in the car during traffic. I got this beautiful mountain range and I love listening to podcasts. It's just another opportunity to help learn and grow.
Mhm.
Put something on the radio, right?
Yeah.
That's gonna, educate me on something I'm interested in, or just a fiction, whatever, right? Audiobook. So it's just it's all perception, right? I'll tell you one thing that's come out of that gap in the game is I try to, at least think about or write down, if I can, 3 wins every day,
that gratitude.
yeah, it's just a little gratitude list. And it doesn't have, it could be, all right, hey, in business, I did X, Y, and Z, or, with the kids, or, whatever, right? Just,
Yeah.
Anything that you can focus on the positive. And then when you go to sleep with that, there's studies that you wake up, just more energized and motivated, right? You get better sleep. And anyways, it falls down the line there. But I really enjoyed our conversation today, Chris. And I told her before we started, I was like, got no agenda. We're just gonna kind of,
Yeah. No, I loved it. And you know what? I like that you said just like getting started, because as I like to call myself, a recovering perfectionist. A lot of times we sit around, we talk about it, we learn about the things, but like we never take that leap forward. And so it's like, it's not going to be perfect. You might buy your first investment property and it's not great. Or, you might make a mistake on something. You might have situations. I mean, the endless stories I could tell you of the things that I've learned in the last 5 years, and from hygiene issues with rental properties and hundreds of thousands of cockroaches to, like changing out the locks wrong and locking people out. Like, you make mistakes, but you learn every single time. So it's just like getting out there, starting it, trying something new. If you fall, you get back up. But that's what the gratitude is there for.
Yep, absolutely. But I think, and again, you touched on it too, is get started, right? Because if you don't if you don't get started,
you're just hanging out at the start line, not
yeah,
going.
wishing you would be where everybody else is, right? That's how they
Yeah.
get to where they're at, is they just get started, and some people fall on their face and fall hard, but you
Yeah.
get back up, like the old sports analogy, right? You're gonna get flagged, you're gonna get penalized. It's not always gonna be fair, but you get back to the huddle.
Get back on the bike again.
Yeah, get back on the bike. Exactly. Well, Kristyn, if you could tell the audience, where they can, learn more about you, connect with you. Do you have Instagram, Facebook?
Oh, we do everything. So we post a lot on Instagram and on TikTok, just like fun family facts of the day, which is very fun to see people's reactions to. But we're at Couples Solution Mediation on Instagram and TikTok. We do on our website, Couple Solution Center. We do a blog every single week on frequently asked questions for couples. That's couples that are married, couples getting a divorce, couples getting together. And so those are kind of our biggest places to come check us out. We do offer a free divorce boot camp twice a month. That's just educational on Meetup for people that just are interested and they want to find out more and they're thinking about separating, but they want to feel more confident or empowered in what that process looks like. And as I mentioned, if you're really obsessed with divorce and real estate, we do have our podcast as well with Asher Cohen. So recommend those.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kristyn, for coming on and just, sharing your insights and, just helping educate us on what that process looks like. It's not all pretty, right? It's not all fun, but I mean, it's good information to know if, you are just getting started out in a relationship and want to know about the prenuptial agreements and how to walk through that to the end of, okay, how do we separate this and go our different ways. So again, enjoyed our conversation today, and thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Optimal Wealth Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, be sure to optimize your results and take massive action on what you have learned here today. For more, visit optimalequitygroup.com.